Good day, everyone. I'm Brian Meeker, and I lead our product strategy and lifecycle management practice at Deloitte. And I'm very happy to have Dale Costy, who leads North and South America sales for Siemens, joining me today to talk about the future of product development and what companies are doing around model-based enterprise, digital twins, and the digital thread. That's a pretty common thing that we're seeing from many of our clients today, asking about what should they be doing in this space. So before we get started, a little introduction about who we are and what we do. So as I said, I lead our product strategy and lifecycle management practice at Deloitte. We do all kinds of large-scale transformations for organizations to help them improve the way they design, develop, manufacture, and launch new products. And when we do, we help clients save pretty significant savings that you can see there off to the right. And then Del, give you a second there.
Yeah, Brian, I do find this particularly fascinating. If I go back a ways, it was very interesting. When I started in this business, our whole job was managing complexity out of our customers. And boy, if things have changed. I mean, you look over the last 20 years, right now, what we're having to do is find ways of harnessing the complexity. And we see it across multiple industries. Our customers today have to identify ways to leverage all that data coming in, managing that complexity of customer requirements, really to drive a competitive advantage. And I think that's been a huge change, Brian.
Yeah, so Dale, I really appreciate that. And, we've worked together for about 15 years now, since the first time that you and I worked on our first client. That alliance that we've built has helped our clients achieve some pretty amazing results over the years. And as I think about your comment around complexity, it's always about managing complexity. And in today's world, the digital twins and the digital thread capabilities now cuts across the organization, and that's unlocking a ton of value. And so what we did was we did a benchmarking study last fall, and we looked at a number of companies that you can see off to the left there across auto and aero and industrials, high-tech companies, as well as some disruptors. And we particularly included those disruptors to make sure that we were looking at companies that weren't encumbered by their legacy systems, their data, and also a way of thinking, quite frankly. And so when we look across these organizations, we found some really interesting results that we're going to share with you. But we've performed this benchmarking study in a way to help a lot of our customers who are asking, what are others doing in this space around model-based enterprise, digital twins, and the digital thread. So we'll share with you what those results look like. But it also set a framework together for what's the interoperability that we're seeing generated from digital twins and model-based enterprise. And I think that's also really interesting. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's the end game. What's this look like, 15 to 20 years out, and what are companies really striving for in this space. So some of the outcomes. So when we looked at the benchmark results, first of all, a lot of companies are looking at this. So if you look at the far right there, 85% of companies are off doing something in this space. However, where the surprising stuff comes in is that of the companies that are focusing on these three different areas. So for instance, on the product digital twin, most companies are thinking they're already doing this today because they have CAD models and they're using their modeling software to create the 3D model. So they think that they're doing model-based design. However, they're oftentimes very quickly converting those over to 2D drawings and sending them off to customers and suppliers, which then negates the whole model-based product. Based on that, what we're seeing and what the benchmark studies show us is that only about 15% of companies actually truly use that model end to end of the product. So when they create that 3D model for a design perspective, they're using that model across their supply chain into manufacturing, across the organization. So that means that there's a lot of organizations that are still converting those models over to 2D. And then when we look at the manufacturing side of this in the production digital twin, only about 5% of companies are actually using a digital twin of their shop floor. And what's even more surprising is less than 5% of companies, so very few companies are actually using it as, in their service and repair and maintenance space of having a digital twin of the product out into service and maintenance. And so there's a lot of work to be done here, and we're still on the up curve of where companies are focusing to get the value and trying to do this. Predominantly, companies are focusing upfront on product design. Like we said, there's a lot of companies are thinking about how it's going to impact manufacturing and sustainment, but they're just not there yet. But one of the things that our companies are asking us, or our clients are asking us, is what are, when we talk about these things, let's put a common framework together that describes exactly what these digital twins are, and then how are models playing a role in those. So we have the product digital twin, which we talked about, thinking about smart factory and supply chain digital twins and how those are going to work, and then the service digital twin. And so I think we'll start with the first one, which is the product digital twin, which is what most people are most familiar with. It is a digital twin of the product, so you can simulate all aspects of that product. But what that requires is that you have, first, we talked about the model-based definition, so being able to create the 3D model. And then you also have, and what we're seeing a lot of companies starting to focus on now, is around the model-based systems engineering. And that's where you're pulling in all of your requirements for mechanical, electrical, and software. And software is playing a huge role in the new designs as we know today. And so that the bringing those three together is really critical from a systems engineering perspective. But that's not the only point here. The other point is, if you look right below that, you see design for X. So design for manufacturability, design for supply chain, design for cost, design for weight, design for compliance. So looking at all of those cross-functional requirements that you need early in the design that then play a role in how you design the software, hardware, and electronics from a model-based perspective. Those are the aspects that are driving the most impact. And it's also eliminating all of the downstream churn that's typically happening today in manufacturing and supply chain. And so having that capability and then being able to simulate, that's what gives you the product digital twin. Okay. And then we're going to move on to the smart factory and supply chain digital twins. And so if you remember, we said that only a few companies, in the 5% range are actually able to create the digital twin of the shop floor. And so how are they doing that? First, they're creating a digital twin of the manufacturing shop floor, so creating that 3D representation of how the shop floor is going to work. And then they're using their bill of process and their digital work instructions and other things to be able to simulate that manufacturing shop floor in a way that it's going to work. Now, here's the interesting thing. A lot of companies are doing this to be able to create a simulation of the launch of a new product. However, once they launch that new product, then they're looking at like, okay, so we spent all that effort and we had a great launch. We had the manufacturing floor set up and it worked very smoothly. But now what? What do we use that for? And so of that 5% of companies, there's a very few of them that have now started to think beyond that and say, well, wait a minute, I have this model, the simulation model of everything that I can do there. What if I combine that with my manufacturing and ERP data and supply and demand to be able to see what's coming from a supply perspective and what demand do I have to make? Can I use that to predict my manufacturing issues that I'm going to run into or my supply chain issues that I'm going to run into? And so we're seeing companies starting to go beyond just thinking about how to launch a new product, but also how they're going to get predictive in their normal day-to-day, week-to-week manufacturing and supply chain. And then the last part is around the service digital twin. And obviously, this is an area where it doesn't apply to all industry sectors, but for those industry sectors that it does apply, being able to have a digital twin of the product coming out of manufacturing, being able to serialize that and then be able to use it to do one, physical product performance. How's it performing in the field? How should I be feeding that back into the early parts of design for the next iteration? Or what's that configuration out in the field and what type of predictive maintenance am I going to have on it? And can I have a way of maintaining that in the field much better so it's up and running more often? Now, when I have all three of these capabilities, this is where we get model-based enterprise. So when you hear organizations talk about, you have model-based development, model-based manufacturing, and model-based maintenance. Those are the three different areas of models that you have today. And you hear companies talk about model-based enterprise. That is creating this whole spectrum of what is the organization able to do with those models. So Del, having heard all of that, what do you think?
Well, look, I think the survey tells a lot, right? I mean, the survey talks about that there's a huge interest in this idea of digital transformation by companies, but there's clearly a varying degree of where companies are on that journey, and I think we align to what you just talked about. We see a lot of companies that made heavy investment in this product-based digital twin, and we've seen a lot of that activity. We've seen the maturation of, as you pointed out, the mechanical, the electrical, the software. And we've seen this great uptick in terms of analysis capability. But I think the picture you draw out here is exactly right. This is what digital enterprise, this is the form it needs to take. And so if we think about the challenges we're being faced with, we opened up with this idea of harnessing all this complexity. Just think about what's happened in the world over the last 18 months. We've seen a pandemic. We've seen companies had to shift focus very quickly. Having this idea of a digital twin has been powerful. Now, let's be real. All digital twins aren't equal. A lot of companies talk about digital twin, but the reality is they're talking about a digital twin in a silo, which is why it's critically important. We talk about this idea of comprehensive digital twin. It entails, Brian, a lot of what you're talking about here. Everything we talked about from multifunction, but also this idea of product digital twin that can take into account process digital twin capabilities, production and service. Now that's something I can truly do interrogation on and really understand the impacts to my business. And how did we get there? Obviously, we've made tremendous investments over the last 10, 15 years in technologies really to round out this strategy. We've been singularly focused on this. And the way we like to talk about it is by having this comprehensive digital twin and coupling it with all of this verification, validation capability, it allows our customers to really interrogate any type of scenario that comes up. Early in the design side, you can analyze all the theoretical performance of the product. But then as I mature out my process of how I'm going to build, I can simulate all that capability. And as the product is in service, I can see the data that's coming in. And obviously with the explosion of IoT and sensor data, I can bring that in and really figure out what the behaviors are. Is it a product design issue or is it a manufacturing issue? It really gives us that ability. And the last thing I'd point out, Brian, is that this was all made possible through maintaining the spirit, which was from our company inception, of openness. And it's critically important, as you can see, on the product design side, dealing with multi-CAD environments that most of our customers have to. On the factory side, there's a ton of legacy systems that are still in play with very important information. And on the service side, there's a lot of big players out there, IBM with Maximo, SAP with Asset Intelligence. And so, regardless of those systems, we need to be able to consume that data, understand it as a model. And I think that's where we've seen tremendous gains with our clients.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about there from an investment and acquisitions that you guys have done. We've as part of your alliance partner in the ecosystem, we've built a lot of pre-configured solutions around your capabilities. I think what you all bring from a technology and a software perspective, and what we bring from a process and program deployment, as well as quite frankly working with those other organizations that you mentioned to interface and create that ecosystem, that's what makes this whole thing work. And I think our two organizations work very well together to help companies achieve their vision here. I do know that it's not easy, and oftentimes our clients are asking us, how do they get started? And as you mentioned, the legacy systems in both product development and manufacturing, it can be a challenge. But our two organizations work very closely together to help them address those things, both from a process perspective. So what's the right process? How do you use the technology, but define the processes that work best? So you can't just throw technology at this. It is a transformation of people. It's a transformation of the processes that they use and the technology that they use to enable the business to do the digital capabilities that they're trying to achieve. And I think our organizations work very well in that ecosystem. Okay, so with that, let's go to where's this all headed? So as we talked about in the previous slide, those models will become the source of the truth. And so if you think out 15, 20 years, what will this look like? So the challenge in today's legacy environments is each of the functions, they have their own silos of data, their own silos of systems, and there's a lot of interfaces that are built. But as more and more companies move to be model-based and are truly using those models from end to end, so cutting across the organization, that capability gives you the model to be the center of the universe, the source of truth, and the capabilities that it enables. It tears down. Right now, what we're seeing is most organizations have already thought about in the silo. So they've done something in product development with PLM. They've done something in manufacturing with MES or IoT related stuff out in the shop floor. And they're starting to think about the maintenance side and what they can do there. But they're often thinking about those in those silos. What you're going to see over the next 15 to 20 years is that the silos no longer retain much importance. Matter of fact, when we're looking at those disruptor type companies, they don't bring the legacy systems. They think from left to right, and actually they think in a cycle all the way around this, that they don't think in functions, they think in capabilities that cut across the organization. And when they do that, they have one source of truth, they're working off of that, and it makes the flow of information go much more seamlessly. And that's how they're getting to much faster cycle times to be able to develop very complex products very quickly. And so what we're seeing in also in the future is that computing power and things like 3D printing are going to enable capabilities that just aren't there yet today. So things like generative design for complex assemblies. Today, a lot of organizations are able to do this for brackets and simple parts. But in 15 to 20 years, with the advancements that are going to happen in computing power and 3D printing, you're going to be able to do generative design for complex assemblies and products in some cases. You're also going to have automated design simulation using those generative designs to be able to come up with many different ways of looking at that product to figure out how, if I were to take hundreds or thousands of different generated designs, how could I simulate those and see which ones are going to work best in the future for you? And then thinking about advanced manufacturing capabilities for very complex assemblies. So that when I talk about the 3D printing, you're going to see that capability instead of just printing simple parts. Or in today's world with some of the automation and robotics, you're going to see that continue to evolve to get much faster utilization of assets across the manufacturing floor. You're also going to have a better supply chain control tower and assets of data that are going to drive the ability to improve the flow of information through the organization. And those control towers today, some organizations are claiming, I have a control tower today. But when you look at the amount of data handling and data wrangling to make those control towers work, it's very, very difficult. When you have models and you're driving everything off of the model in the future, having those capabilities will make it a lot easier to get that data and make instantaneous decisions off of real-time data versus today, it's often a day or a week old by the time you integrate all the data and try to get something into the control tower. So it makes it much more difficult. And then you also have real-time insights that are coming off the product. So having the sensors out in the products and getting real-time insights from those all the way back into design and manufacturing are really important, which then brings us right back over, because it is a cycle, being able to use artificial intelligence and machine language to drive those insights back into the product and back into the generative design. So you can see it comes full circle, and these capabilities are going to drive, significant savings. Based on what we're seeing in the benchmarks, a lot of companies are saving in their silos when they're doing this today 20 to 30%. And that's really important. I mean, those are big numbers, big savings in cycle time and labor that it takes to design and develop these products and get them launched. However, when companies move to this, they're going to see an additional 20 to 40%. So you're going to get up into the 70 to 80% savings, which seems ludicrous and actually not real. But when you see the value that these capabilities, when you go to a full model base, it will drive that level of improvements. And that's where we're seeing, the model-based enterprise and digital thread taking organizations in the future. So Del, with those thoughts, closing out the discussion, what do you think?
I think those are awesome thoughts. Actually, it leads me to a couple of realizations. So our CEO, Tony Helmegarn, is talking about this idea of redefine what's humanly possible, which I think is an amazing theme. And Brian, you commented on some things that I think ring true. We spend a lot of time talking about product innovation, and rightfully so, we should. And we see all these down payments companies are making to this 2040 future. But there are other elements too that are coming forward, and you hit on this idea of process innovation, this idea of people innovation. One of the acquisitions we recently made was Mendix, and this idea of low code, no code development. And we're seeing great examples of companies being able to harness the talent of their organization. There are great ideas that exist out there with your thousands of employees. And how do you harness those quickly and iterate on ideas faster than we used to do in the traditional method? So that's one thing. The other thing that comes to mind is this idea of trust. The power of trusting the digital strategy and the information. When you set this strategy and these sets of technologies up and the processes that go with it, and you enable the people, you have an opportunity to trust. And I think we've seen down payments, Brian, of what you're talking about here already. I think fondly of the rover missions, and I remember seeing the first video, 7 minutes of terror, and unless you're involved, it's hard to appreciate what happened for those teams. But they had to design a product, simulate a product, and go into a mission with zero prototyping, and think of how far away they were in that real-time understanding of what was happening. Talk about having trust in your data, in your process, in your people. Great example of that. But we've seen some other amazing stories. I mean, just recently, companies that decided to shift focus and do for common good, for the good of the public with PPE production. Something they hadn't made before, but on a dime, shifting their capability and leveraging digital twins and data to be able to do that. Or whether it's a rapid development of a vaccine. We've seen other great stories. You can see as part of Realize Live, but Unlimited Tomorrow. Brian, some of the things you talked about, you've got a young entrepreneur looking to do good in the world by taking a difficult challenge, prosthetics, and think about the application for children. They're still growing and they're super expensive, but finding a way, leveraging technology to do it in cases a tenth of the cost. And really being able to democratize prosthetics for children. I mean, just unbelievable applications of technology, harnessing these ideas to do really, really great things for the world.
Yeah, and actually, Del, I think for those older organizations, they should definitely be taking note of the disruption capabilities that this technology provides. Because we're seeing in certain sectors, industry sectors, where new entrants are coming in out of left field, bringing these capabilities at a fraction of the time, fraction of the cost, and a product that is superior. And when they do that, it's really disruptive and can radically change the makeup of the market share very, very quickly. And it's hard to recover from that. And some of the larger organizations that we all know and loved back in the 80s and 90s don't exist anymore because of the disruption that capabilities exist. As this comes online, we're going to see this play out, probably even faster. So very, very, very true. Okay, so with that, I know we're just about out of time. So I want to thank everybody. If you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We would love to come and sit with you and understand what challenges you're facing. How we can help you transform into your future vision. Collectively, as Del had said earlier, this type of a transformation, it takes scale. It takes an understanding of these capabilities, both from a process, from a technology, and a people dimension. And we're here to work very, very closely with you. And so, Del, I'll let you have some closing thoughts as well.
Well, I think you summarized it extremely well. I had the privilege of listening to one of our largest customers this morning, and the customer was asked, kind of why Siemens, and the answer led me to think about our partnership, Brian, with you at Deloitte. And he boiled it down to three main topics. He just hit on one: scale. I think about the scale of the technology, being able to handle all these processes, the data, the complexity we were talking about. And Brian, you just mentioned scale in terms of the ability of the partnership. I think about openness, something I know both of our companies hold dear for us with the technology and the ecosystem. And then the last thing, which I was really pleased to hear, is this idea of listening. And we take great pride as a customer success focused organization and really listening to our customers. And Brian, I know Deloitte feels the same way. So again, scale, openness, and listening. I thought those were great ways to summarize what we can bring to the table as a partnership.
Very good. Well, thank you, Dale, for joining me for this short discussion. And as always, if any of you are interested, please feel free to reach out to Dale or myself. We'd be happy to help you in this space in any way that we can. With that, have a good day.
Thank you.